Have you ever looked at yourself at the end of a long day and whispered, asterisk, I'm so lazy, asterisk? The words feel small, almost harmless, yet they sting deeper than most insults ever could. They creep into every corner of your mind, shaping how you move, how you see your worth. Lazy becomes a quiet accusation that follows you from morning until night. It turns rest into guilt, pauses into proof of failure. But what if that word has been lying to you? You're not lazy. You're tired of pretending that constant movement equals value. You're weary from years of pressure to perform, to appear efficient, to be times on times, even when your heart begs for stillness. Somewhere along the way, you confused stillness with waste, calm with failure, softness with shame. When you call yourself lazy, you close the door on understanding. The label explains nothing. It only condemns. It doesn't ask why times you feel stuck, or what times you're afraid of. It doesn't see the invisible effort it takes to simply exist inside a mind that never stops talking, a body that carries unsolved stories. Pause for a moment. Feel the heaviness behind that word. Notice how it sits not in your muscles, but in your chest. That's not the weight of idleness, it's the weight of self-judgment. It's the echo of voices that taught you worth was something you earn, never something you already have. Think back to when you were a child. You started tasks with wonder, not with deadlines. You built imaginary worlds, got lost for hours, forgot to be efficient. Then someone began to measure you. Gold stars, grades, expectations. The magic of times doing for the joy of doing times slowly turned into times doing to be enough asterisk. Each unmet standard added another stone to your pockets until movement itself began to feel heavy. Now, when you sit still, that old fear whispers, asterisk. You're wasting time. Asterisk. So you scroll, you distract, you keep busy, not because you love what you're doing, but because silence exposes the pressure. And when exhaustion finally catches you, you collapse and call the collapse laziness. Listen closely. The part of you that hesitates isn't broken. It's cautious. It remembers disappointment. It remembers trying and not being seen, starting and being mocked, wanting and being denied. So it hesitates to start again. Your stillness is self-protection, not self-destruction. Imagine your mind as a guardian standing at the doorway of every new beginning. Each time you reach for something uncertain, that guardian raises a hand. Asterisk. Are you sure it's safe? Asterisk. If you mistake that question for defiance, you'll fight it. But if you understand it as care, you can answer gently, asterisk. Yes, it's safe enough to try. Asterisk. The truth is, no one is born lazy. Even rest has intention. What we call laziness is often a tangled mix of fatigue, fear, and confusion. You long to move, but you don't know where movement will take you or whether you'll survive what it brings. So you stay still, waiting for certainty that never comes. There's nothing wrong with waiting. The pause between thought and action is where awareness grows. But when waiting turns into self-attack, when every pause becomes a courtroom, you trap yourself in a loop of guilt. The more you shame yourself, the less energy you have to change, and the cycle continues. Try softening the language. Instead of saying, times I'm lazy, asterisk, say times. Something in me is resisting right now. Asterisk. Notice how that small shift opens a window instead of closing a door. Resistance invites curiosity. Laziness demands punishment. One creates space, the other creates shame. Take a breath. Feel your lungs expand. That movement alone disproves laziness. Your body is never truly still. Even at rest, your heart works. Your cells rebuild. Your mind dreams. Life moves through you, whether you try or not. Maybe the task ahead doesn't require more willpower. It requires permission to move at your own rhythm. You don't have to prove your worth by burning out. The world doesn't become brighter because you forced yourself past your limit. It becomes brighter when you act from calm clarity, when effort flows naturally from meaning instead of guilt. So tonight, when the familiar thought returns times, I should have done more times, pause before believing it. Ask a kinder question. Asterisk. What am I afraid of right now? Asterisk. Let the answer speak quietly. It might say, asterisk, I'm afraid to start because I don't want to fail again. Asterisk. It might say, asterisk, I'm tired of trying alone. Asterisk. Whatever it says, listen. That is where understanding begins, not in forcing motion, but in meeting the fear beneath stillness. By the end of this chapter, you'll see that the word lazy was never your identity. It was just a mask fear wore to protect you from the pain of beginning. Beneath it lives a simple truth. You don't need to push harder. You need to see yourself with gentleness. And as this realization settles, another question quietly rises, shimmering just at the edge of thought. Asterisk. If laziness isn't real, what is this heaviness that holds me back? Asterisk. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to do nothing? You sit there, staring at the list, the message, the half-finished dream, and somehow you grow more tired by the minute. Your shoulders sink, your breath shortens, your mind circles like a bird that has forgotten how to land. The strange truth is that avoiding something often costs more energy than doing it. Every unfinished task hums in the background like a quiet electrical current. You think you're resting, but your body is still preparing for the moment you'll finally begin. Muscles tense, thoughts loop. Guilt builds. You tell yourself you're conserving strength, yet every second of hesitation leaks a little more of it. Avoidance is not idleness. It's invisible labor. Inside you, two forces pull in opposite directions. One wants to move forward, to write, to clean, to call, to change. The other clings to the edge of safety, whispering, asterisk. Not yet. Asterisk. Both sides fight for the same thing, peace. One believes peace lies in completion, the other believes peace lies in protection. The battle itself is what drains you. Think of the times you postponed a simple task for days, only to discover that doing it took 10 minutes. The relief afterward feels almost euphoric. That feeling isn't pride, it's the release of all the tension that had been quietly accumulating. You were never lazy. You were holding a rope pulled from both ends. Avoidance thrives in uncertainty. When a task is vague, your mind fills in the blanks with danger. The more you imagine, the heavier it feels. That's why you can scroll for hours without pleasure. Your attention is half elsewhere, half resisting what waits beyond the screen. You are spending energy without direction, like a car stuck in gear. Notice the body when you procrastinate. The shallow breath, the restless fingers, the stomach that twists each time the thought of starting appears. These are not signs of disinterest, they're signs of fear translated into movement. You are working hard to keep yourself safe from what you haven't yet named. Ask yourself gently, asterisk, what would happen if I began? Asterisk. Not in theory, not for the rest of the month, just for the next small step. Let the mind answer honestly. Maybe it says, asterisk, I'll disappoint myself again. Asterisk. Maybe. Asterisk. It won't be perfect. Asterisk. Maybe. Asterisk. Maybe. Asterisk. I'll lose control of everything else I'm balancing. Asterisk. Each answer reveals the true source of exhaustion, the stories you carry, not the task itself. Avoidance is clever. It disguises itself as rest, but real rest restores you. Avoidance leaves you heavier. Rest empties the mind. Avoidance clutters it. Rest says, asterisk, you've done enough for now. Asterisk. Avoidance says, asterisk, you'll never do enough. Asterisk. They may look alike from a distance, but one nourishes and the other quietly erodes. There is a small experiment you can try the next time you feel paralyzed. Instead of commanding yourself to act, whisper permission. Asterisk, I can start badly. I can start slowly. I can start scared. Asterisk. Notice how the body softens when the threat of perfection is removed. Often, movement begins in that sigh of relief. Every action you postpone stays alive inside you. It doesn't disappear, it transforms into background noise, a hum of unfinished intention. The more you accumulate, the louder it gets, until silence becomes unbearable. That's why people fill their days with distractions. It isn't comfort they seek, it's quiet from the noise of all they're avoiding. Imagine closing a single open tab in your mind. One small thing completed, one promise kept. Feel the space that opens. That emptiness is power returning to you. It's proof that energy never vanishes, it only shifts between resistance and release. So when you catch yourself saying, asterisk, I'm wasting time, asterisk, remember this. Even avoidance is effort. You are not weak for feeling tired. You are tired because you have been wrestling with yourself. The work has been happening beneath the surface all along. Let that truth be kind, not cruel. Instead of demanding that you suddenly leap into action, let it simply explain your fatigue. When you understand why you're drained, compassion replaces shame. And from compassion, real energy begins to rise again quietly, steadily. Somewhere inside that returning energy lives a question. Asterisk. If avoidance consumes this much strength, what would happen if I used the same strength to move 1 inch forward? Asterisk. There's a moment before you begin when everything inside you feels louder. Your heart beats harder. Your thoughts scatter. And an invisible hand seems to hold you still. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right mood, the right spark, a sign. But beneath that waiting is fear. The soft kind that doesn't shout or shake. It hides in hesitation. Fear is patient. It doesn't need to stop you with panic. It can stop you with quiet logic. Asterisk. You're not ready yet. You don't know enough. You might embarrass yourself. Asterisk. It whispers these things kindly, almost protectively. It doesn't want to hurt you, it wants to keep you safe. But safety, when stretched too far, becomes a cage. Every time you've tried something new and failed, every time someone laughed, every time an effort went unnoticed, a small part of you learned. Asterisk. Starting hurts. Asterisk. And because your mind remembers pain more vividly than joy, it keeps you from stepping into it again. Fear builds its walls from memory, and those walls can look a lot like comfort. That's why beginnings feel heavier than endings. The unknown is bigger than the known, and your body treats uncertainty like danger. To protect you, it floods you with resistance, the racing thoughts, the sudden fatigue, the urge to clean, scroll, or plan instead. These aren't random distractions. They are the nervous system's shield against risk. You may call this paralysis, but it's really overprotection. You're standing at the border between who you are and who you could become. And both selves are pulling you in opposite directions. The current version wants stability. The emerging one wants growth. The tension between them is what you feel as fear. Sometimes that fear hides beneath perfectionism. You tell yourself you'll start when the plan is perfect, the timing ideal, the path clear. But the perfection you're chasing doesn't exist. It's a mirage built by fear to keep you running in circles. Fear would rather you dream endlessly than risk waking up. It's easy to think courage means erasing fear, but it doesn't. Courage is the quiet agreement to move with it, to let the shaking hands still build, the uncertain heart still begin. There's a tenderness in that kind of bravery, one that doesn't fight fear but listens to it. If you sit with your stillness long enough, you'll start to hear what fear actually says beneath its warnings. Often it says, asterisk, I don't want to be hurt again. Asterisk. Sometimes it says, asterisk, I don't want to disappoint myself. Asterisk. And sometimes, the simplest truth. Asterisk. I just don't know how to start. Asterisk. Hearing that voice doesn't make you weak, it makes you whole. The moment you name fear, you turn the invisible visible. That's the first step out of paralysis, not action, but awareness. Take a breath. Feel where fear sits in your body. Maybe it's your throat, your chest, your stomach. Don't push it away. Just acknowledge. Asterisk. I see you. Asterisk. The body relaxes, not when fear disappears, but when it feels seen. Awareness melts resistance, like warmth melts ice slowly, naturally. Remember a time you finally began something you'd been avoiding. The fear didn't vanish. It changed shape. It became focus, adrenaline, alertness. What once froze you became fuel once you crossed the threshold. This is proof that fear and energy are the same force wearing different masks. Your task is not to destroy fear, but to redirect its energy toward movement. When you treat fear as an enemy, you turn your own strength against you. But when you treat it as a messenger, you begin to hear what it's trying to protect. Maybe it's the child who was laughed at in class. Maybe it's the adult who tried and lost everything. Fear is memory asking for compassion. So the next time you feel that invisible wall before starting, don't curse it. Pause, whisper, asterisk, thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I'm safe enough to begin. Asterisk. You'll be surprised how the body responds to kindness. A deep breath, a little release, a spark of momentum. That's how beginnings are made, not through force, but through gentle permission. Fear doesn't disappear when you start, it transforms into motion. And once you're in motion, it no longer needs to protect you, it can rest. By now, you can see that stillness isn't laziness or lack of will. It's the mind's way of saying, asterisk, wait, are you sure this time will be different? Asterisk. And the truth is, it will be, because this time you're not running from fear, you're walking beside it. As you carry this understanding, another insight begins to form. If fear is trying to keep me safe, maybe I can teach it a new definition of safety, one that includes movement. Every time you call yourself lazy, unmotivated, or undisciplined, you overlook the quiet truth. Your resistance isn't rebellion, it's protection. It might sound strange, even frustrating. How could the very force that keeps you from moving be the same one trying to help you? But that's how the mind works. It doesn't measure success the way you do. It measures safety. When you hesitate, stall, or find yourself lost in endless small distractions, your mind is running an ancient program designed to shield you from danger. Long before deadlines and social comparisons, resistance was how humans survived. When something felt uncertain, your nervous system paused, scanned, and waited for proof that it was safe to act. That pause used to save lives. Now it simply delays them. You might see resistance as a wall, but it's more like a guardian standing in front of the unknown. It doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to make sure that the pain you've already endured doesn't repeat itself. Every half-written idea, every opportunity you almost took, every moment you froze, they all left impressions, subtle signals of not safe. Resistance collects those signals and builds armor out of them. That's why when you finally decide, today I'll change, something invisible pulls you back. It's not a lack of willpower. It's your mind, remembering how much it hurt the last time you tried. The essay that was torn apart by criticism. The job that ended before it began. The moment you gave everything and were met with silence. Your brain has filed these away as warnings. This protective force is powerful because it wears logic's disguise. It tells you, you're tired. You need more time. You should wait until you're ready. And in some ways, it's right. Forcing yourself when you're fragile can cause real harm. But the danger is when this mechanism never shuts off. When protection becomes permanent, growth becomes impossible. Carl Jung described this inner tug-of-war as a conversation between the ego and the unconscious. The ego wants order, predictability, safety. The unconscious wants wholeness, even if that means chaos for a while. Resistance is the tension between these two worlds. It's the psyche's way of saying, something inside you is not aligned yet. You can't win against resistance by fighting it. Every battle strengthens it, because conflict confirms danger. The more you declare war on your hesitation, the more your mind assumes something must be wrong. The way through is not aggression but curiosity. Ask, what exactly are you protecting me from? Maybe it answers with images, a memory, a name, a moment when you felt exposed. Maybe it stays silent. That's fine too. Just asking the question begins to soften its grip. Resistance loses its power when it's acknowledged. It thrives in the shadows, where it can twist your intentions into self-criticism. But in the light of awareness, it becomes what it truly is, fear wearing armor. When you treat resistance as an ally instead of an enemy, everything changes. You stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as cautious. You realize your hesitation isn't proof of failure, it's proof of care. You've simply been trying to stay safe in a world that often made safety feel conditional. Imagine standing in front of a locked door. For years you've pushed against it, calling yourself weak for not breaking through. But what if the door was locked from the inside? What if the part of you holding the key has been waiting, not for strength, but for understanding? The moment you stop forcing and start listening, that door begins to open. Resistance doesn't vanish. It transforms. It steps aside because it no longer needs to guard what you're finally willing to feel. Let this be your reframe. You don't have to crush your resistance. You have to comfort it. You don't have to fight for motivation. You have to make safety the new starting point. The next time you sit down to begin and feel that familiar heaviness rise, take a deep breath and say, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to go slow. Watch what happens in your body, a tiny release, a subtle forward lean, maybe even the first hint of momentum. That's resistance learning that it no longer needs to stop you to protect you, because safety and motion can coexist. You can move gently, you can begin tenderly. And once you understand that, another question starts to unfold in your mind. If resistance is protection, what exactly am I protecting, and who taught me that I needed to? That question leads us deeper into the next layer. The shadow. Asterisk, asterisk. The hidden expectations, the old voices, and the unseen parts of you that shape every hesitation. That's where we're headed next. There are parts of you that never see the light not because they are bad, but because they were once rejected. These are the forgotten rooms of the psyche, the places you learn to hide in order to be loved, praised, or simply left in peace. Jung called this constellation of hidden fragments asterisk asterisk the shadow asterisk asterisk. And whether you know it or not, it is steering more of your life than the version of you that you show the world. When you freeze before starting, when you sabotage what you care about, when you turn small missteps into proof that you'll never change, that is the shadow moving beneath the surface. It isn't a monster. It's an unhealed memory trying to protect you from being hurt in the same old way. Think of how early that conditioning began. A teacher called you careless. A parent compared you to someone more disciplined. A friend mocked your excitement when you shared an idea. Each moment taught your nervous system something specific. Asterisk. Showing myself is risky. Asterisk. Over time, those lessons fused into identity. You didn't just learn that failing is painful, you learned that trying times, is dangerous. So now, before every new beginning, a silent part of you whispers, asterisk. Don't go there again. Asterisk. That voice doesn't belong to you, it's borrowed from the past. But it speaks with the authority of memory. And that's what makes it so convincing. Notice how the shadow hides behind noble reason. It says, asterisk, I just want to get it right. Asterisk. It says, asterisk, I need more preparation. Asterisk. It says, asterisk, I don't want to disappoint anyone. Asterisk. These statements sound responsible, but they often mask a deeper fear, the terror of being seen as you truly are. You've spent years crafting an image of competence, of composure, of someone who has their life in order. The shadow holds everything that doesn't fit that image. Confusion, neediness, doubt, laziness, jealousy, desire. Every trait you judge in yourself becomes part of that hidden collection. And because you can't bear to look at it, you spend your energy keeping it out of sight. That's why you're so tired. It takes enormous effort to hold back entire pieces of yourself. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To understand your resistance, you have to illuminate the shadow, not banish it, but see it. Because the moment you see it, it stops working against you in secret. Start simply. Ask. Asterisk. What am I afraid people would think if they saw me trying and failing? Asterisk. Then go deeper. Asterisk. Whose approval am I still chasing? Asterisk. The answers may sting, but they are keys. Each one opens a door to freedom. You might discover that you're not actually afraid of failure, you're afraid of exposure. You don't fear the work. You fear the judgment that might follow it. Somewhere along the way, you tied your worth to performance, and now every small beginning feels like a trial. Look closely at that pattern. When you procrastinate, when you stall, you're not avoiding the task. You're avoiding the feeling. Shame, inadequacy, vulnerability. These are the shapes of your shadow, and until you meet them, they'll keep controlling the show from behind the curtain. There's a quiet miracle that happens when you stop running from these feelings. At first they swell, dark and dense. But if you stay present, if you breathe and let them exist, they begin to soften. They start telling stories instead of issuing threats. They remind you where they came from. The scolding tone of a parent, the laughter in a classroom, the silence after you shared something honest. When you hear these echoes, you can finally say, asterisk. That was then. This is now. Asterisk. The shadow loses its grip when the present self becomes strong enough to protect the child it once was. Every time you acknowledge a hidden fear instead of shaming it, you reclaim energy that's been trapped in avoidance. That reclaimed energy is what movement feels like. That's why awareness often precedes action. You're not gaining motivation. You're retrieving power that was already yours. There's one more step, though. Awareness must become relationship. Seeing your shadow isn't enough. You must learn to walk beside it. Let it speak, but don't let it drive. Give it a seat in the room, not the steering wheel. So the next time you hesitate, imagine turning to that shadowed self and saying, Asterisk, I know you're trying to protect me, but we can handle this together. Asterisk. You'll feel the resistance ease, not because the fear is gone, but because it no longer has to work alone. You can't eliminate the shadow, it's part of what makes you human. But you can integrate it, and when you do, what once looked like sabotage becomes wisdom in disguise. And as this realization settles, a new curiosity begins to emerge. Asterisk. If the shadow holds the power to stop me, could it also hold the power to set me free? Asterisk. 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 That is where we go next, into the moment of meeting what you've been avoiding, and the quiet liberation that follows when you finally let it speak. Close your eyes for a moment, and imagine the part of you that keeps saying, times later. Asterisk. It doesn't hide in some faraway darkness. It sits quietly just beneath your ribs, watching you. When you scold it, it winces. When you ignore it, it waits. When you finally notice it, it exhales not in relief, but in disbelief that you finally looked its way. This is the self you've been avoiding. Not a villain, not laziness personified, but a younger, frightened part of you that learned stillness as a survival skill. It doesn't need punishment. It needs presence. Meeting it isn't complicated, but it is uncomfortable. The first instinct is to fix it, to strategize, to motivate, to promise that tomorrow will be different. Yet this voice doesn't understand logic or schedules. It understands tone. It listens for warmth. When you speak kindly to it, it begins to trust that it no longer needs to protect you through avoidance. Picture yourself sitting beside that younger self, the one who started 100 things and finished few, who carries the shame of every unfinished attempt. What would you tell them if you weren't in a hurry to make them change? Perhaps you'd say, Asterisk. You were only scared, and that's okay. Asterisk. Perhaps, asterisk. You didn't fail. You just didn't feel safe enough yet. Asterisk. Notice how even imagining this conversation softens your chest. That is integration beginning. We spend our lives chasing motivation when what we really need is reconciliation. Until you reconcile with the parts of you you've abandoned, no system or habit will stick. The psyche cannot move forward while divided against itself. The energy that could go toward action is spent maintaining the separation. Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole, bringing light to the unconscious and harmony between the parts. To meet what you've avoided is to begin that process. It's the point where understanding turns into compassion. Compassion doesn't mean approval. It means seeing clearly without punishment. You can look at your fear and say, Asterisk. I understand why you stopped me. Asterisk, without letting it keep control. The mind obeys the tone you use with it. Blame tightens, curiosity opens. Try this small exercise the next time you notice avoidance. Instead of pushing, pause and say, internally, asterisk. Something in me is resisting, and that's okay. I'll listen before I move. Asterisk. Then listen, not for answers, but for sensations. A flutter in the stomach, a heaviness in the chest, a thought that repeats. That's communication. That's the unconscious speaking in its native language. As you stay with it, images may surface: a memory of embarrassment, a phrase someone once said that stung more than it should have, the feeling of being behind while others raced ahead. Don't analyze these too quickly. Just acknowledge them. You are witnessing the moment when emotion finally finds words. When you meet what you've avoided, you take the energy that was locked in fear and return it to motion. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like quiet relief, like breath returning to places that have been tight for too long. The body understands integration before the mind does. Avoidance, after all, is not absence. It is energy in disguise. Every no to a task is a yes to protection. By meeting the protector, you reclaim the choice of where that energy goes next. You stop being ruled by unseen reflexes and begin to act with awareness. There's a story told in many healing traditions that the treasure you seek is guarded by the dragon you fear. But no one tells you that the dragon is also lonely. It has been waiting for someone brave enough to approach without a sword. The moment you do, it stops breathing fire. It becomes a guide. So when fear appears again, and it will treat it as a signal, not an obstacle. The mind is saying, asterisk, here lies something important. Approach gently. Asterisk. This is how you move from resistance to relationship. You no longer stand outside your own door, knocking and demanding entry. You sit inside, beside every hidden feeling, and light a small lamp. You look around and realize none of it was as monstrous as you imagined. The stillness that once felt suffocating becomes sanctuary. The part of you that once froze becomes the compass that points toward what still needs care. This is how avoidance turns into awareness, not through force, but through intimacy with yourself. By meeting what you've been avoiding, you learn the oldest truth of all. There was never an enemy within you, only misunderstood messengers. Each hesitation, each delay, each sigh before starting was your psyche saying, asterisk, please listen, asterisk. Now that you have, something begins to loosen. The path forward doesn't feel like a cliff anymore. It feels like a doorway. Behind it, there will still be effort, still be fear, but also a sense of quiet companionship, you and your shadow walking together. And as that image settles in your mind, another realization emerges softly. If avoidance was my body's way of protecting me, then healing must be my way of thanking it. That understanding marks the end of resistance and the beginning of peace, the bridge between the person you've been and the person who is finally ready to begin. You wake up one morning determined that this time will be different. You plan your day, promise yourself you'll start, and for a few moments it feels like everything might finally shift. But by afternoon, a familiar weight creeps in. The body grows slower, the mind fogs over, and the smallest task feels monumental. You whisper again, asterisk, why does it take so much just to try? Asterisk. That heaviness is not weakness, it's history. Every time you've tried before and met disappointment, your body stored the memory. Each unfinished attempt left behind not just frustration, but a trace of grief. The next time you try, that grief wakes up. Effort becomes a reminder of all the times effort wasn't enough. Trying feels heavy because you are not only lifting the task in front of you, you are lifting the ghosts of every attempt that came before it. We live in a culture that worships persistence but rarely talks about the exhaustion of constant effort. We are taught to push, to just do it. to treat burnout as proof of character. But the psyche doesn't thrive on pressure. It thrives on meaning. When effort becomes punishment instead of expression, the soul resists. Listen to that resistance. Beneath it is wisdom. The tiredness that stops you isn't always laziness. Sometimes it's honesty. It's your body saying, asterisk, I don't want to keep proving my worth through pain. Asterisk. Trying feels heavy when effort is tied to identity. You tell yourself that finishing something will finally silence the inner critic. You imagine the peace of being done, being validated, being enough. But that kind of peace never lasts, because it's built on comparison, not connection. There's a gentler way to relate to effort, one that doesn't demand perfection but invites participation. Instead of asking, asterisk, how much can I do? Asterisk. Ask, asterisk, how can I do this kindly? Asterisk. Kind effort looks different. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shame. It recognizes that you are human, not a machine. It understands that some days, the greatest victory is showing up for 5 quiet minutes. Imagine effort as a rhythm instead of a race. There are days when movement flows easily, when the work feels alive in your hands. And there are days when everything drags, when the simplest action feels impossible. Both belong. One is the inhale, the other, the exhale. You cannot sustain one without the other. If you've ever watched the tide, you know that even the ocean pulls back before every new wave. That pause is not failure. It's gathering. Trying can feel heavy because you have forgotten how to honor the gathering. You mistake the pause for regression, but it's just breath, the psyche refilling itself before motion. What would happen if you let effort feel like breathing? If you gave as much permission to rest as you give to striving? The heaviness might still come, but it would lose its sting. You would stop interpreting it as a flaw and begin seeing it as feedback. You can test this idea in small ways. Before you start a task, pause and ask, asterisk, am I doing this to connect or to prove? Asterisk. If the answer is to prove, slow down. Redirect the energy toward curiosity. Approach the task as an exploration, not an exam. That shift alone lightens the weight. Trying feels heavy when you carry the gaze of others on your back, the imagined expectations of parents, peers, invisible audiences. But what if you were the only witness? Would you move differently if no one could judge? Often, the weight drops the moment you realize most of it isn't even yours. You don't have to push yourself into action. You can invite yourself. You can make effort a form of care, not coercion. The next time you feel that old fatigue before starting, instead of saying, asterisk, I can't do this again, asterisk whisper, asterisk. Of course it's heavy. I've been carrying too much meaning in every movement. Asterisk. Let that realization loosen your shoulders. Feel how the breath deepens when permission replaces pressure. This is how you begin to make peace with effort, by separating it from your worth, by letting it be an expression instead of a sentence. You are not lazy for needing rest. You are not broken for finding effort hard. You are simply human, learning to move without punishment. And as you let that truth settle, another question arises, soft and hopeful. Asterisk. If effort doesn't have to hurt, what could it feel like when it comes from love instead of fear? Asterisk. That question is the bridge to what comes next, learning to redefine progress itself, to measure movement not by speed, but by presence. You've been taught that progress is a straight line, a steady climb toward a clear summit. You start at the bottom, push through struggle, and arrive triumphant at the top. But real growth rarely looks like that. It's messy, uneven, full of plateaus and spirals. It's waking up some mornings full of fire, and others wondering if you've gone backward. Progress is less a path, and more a pulse expanding and contracting, like breath. The idea of constant improvement sounds noble, but it quietly feeds the same fear that keeps you stuck. When you measure your life only by forward motion, every pause feels like failure. You forget that stillness is part of the rhythm. Even the heart rests between beats. Look around you, nature itself moves in cycles, not ladders. The moon waxes and wanes. The seasons turn. Trees shed their leaves to survive winter. They do not call themselves lazy for it. Yet when you rest, you panic, as if your worth expires with your productivity. Somewhere along the way, you began equating motion with meaning. Society reinforced it. Grades, deadlines, to-do lists, algorithms, endless metrics that convert your existence into data. You started to believe that to be seen, you must be producing. But you are not a factory. You are a living system. And living systems thrive on balance, not output. Progress, in its truest sense, isn't about addition. It's about integration. It's what happens when understanding begins to change behavior. Not when you rush, but when you embody what you've learned. Think of the moments that have truly changed you. They probably weren't loud or public. They were quiet realizations: the day you forgave someone, the evening you admitted you were tired, the morning you decided to keep trying after failing again. None of those moments look impressive on paper, yet they're the foundation of real transformation. Redefining progress means reclaiming those invisible victories. It's noticing when you pause before reacting, when you treat yourself with kindness instead of critique. It's remembering that healing isn't glamorous. It's subtle. Sometimes the bravest thing you do all week is rest without guilt. Try saying this aloud. Asterisk. My worth doesn't increase with my output. Asterisk. Repeat it until it feels less like a slogan and more like truth. Your value was never earned through productivity. It's inherent, constant, alive, even in stillness. When you stop tying worth to progress, you free yourself to actually enjoy it. Progress isn't about how far you move, but how deeply you inhabit where you are. If you can sit with discomfort without running, you're progressing. If you can begin again after falling apart, you're progressing. If you can forgive yourself for not being there yet, you're already further than you think. There's a quiet kind of momentum that comes from gentle consistency, showing up not to prove something, but because you care. Think of a musician practicing scales, not for applause, but for connection. Or a gardener tending soil, trusting that roots grow unseen. These small, sustained acts of care build strength that sudden bursts of effort never can. The mind, however, loves measurable progress. Numbers, checklists, evidence. It wants certainty. So give it structure, but fill that structure with grace. Break big goals into smaller ones. Count moments of awareness, not just outcomes. Record gratitude alongside accomplishments. Make metrics that include mercy. When you redefine progress, you also redefine success. Success stops being the end of struggle and becomes participation in life. It's no longer about control, but engagement, meeting each day with curiosity instead of expectation. Imagine a life where you could look at a slow day and think, asterisk. This too is part of it. Asterisk. Where you could miss a step and not spiral into shame, but simply notice and return. That's what sustainable growth feels. like less dramatic, more honest. You can't rush a sunrise, and you can't rush yourself. The light always comes, not because the world forces it, but because that's what the world does. Your task is not to make progress happen faster. Your task is to stop interrupting it with doubt. So the next time you wonder, asterisk, am I moving forward? Asterisk, try a gentler question. Asterisk, am I becoming more aware? Asterisk, awareness always precedes movement. The more aware you are, the more natural your actions become. And as that thought settles, the heaviness of trying begins to ease. Because when you stop chasing progress and start trusting it, effort stops feeling like a burden and begins to feel like breathing. Now that you can see progress through softer eyes, the next step is learning how to move, how to take the smallest, kindest action that reminds your body it's safe to begin. That's where we'll go next. Into asterisk. Asterisk. The first gentle move. Asterisk. Asterisk, where momentum is born not from pressure, but from peace. Every journey begins with a moment so small it's almost invisible. One breath, one thought, one flicker of willingness. But because you've been taught that progress must be loud and dramatic, you overlook the quiet beginnings. You wait for the surge of motivation, the perfect plan, the right time. Yet the first true step never comes from excitement, it comes from softness. Starting doesn't require a storm of energy, it requires a pause long enough to feel where you are. Notice the ground beneath you, the weight of your body, the breath you've already taken without effort. Movement begins there in awareness, not urgency. For years, you've associated beginning with pressure, a demand, a deadline, a battle cry. But what if you could begin the way the dawn begins slowly, imperceptibly, spreading warmth before light? The first gentle move is exactly that, not a leap, but a lean toward possibility. Ask yourself, asterisk, what is the smallest action that would honor what I value right now? Asterisk. Not the biggest, not the bravest, the smallest. Something that feels kind to do, not cruel to avoid. It might be opening the document, not writing the page. Sitting at the piano, not playing the song. Putting your shoes by the door, not running the mile. Tiny movements teach your nervous system that action doesn't have to hurt. They rebuild trust between thought and motion. Every time you follow through on a small promise, your body learns that starting isn't dangerous anymore. Think of a frozen river in early spring. The ice doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks in thin lines that spread slowly, letting the water move beneath before it's visible on the surface. That's how fear thaws. One gentle move at a time. The mistake we make is trying to control the whole path before we've even taken the first step. We want certainty, a guarantee that the effort will be worth it. But the path only appears as you walk. The mind cannot calculate its way into courage. It must feel its way there. So instead of forcing yourself to start, create conditions that make starting easier. Clear a space. Breathe deeply. Light a candle. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Whatever you choose, make it sacred, not stressful. Rituals calm the mind and signal the body. Asterisk. We are safe to begin. Asterisk. 1 to be. End of 2.sla. Asterisk. 1. When the inevitable resistance whispers. Asterisk. This is pointless. Asterisk. Answer softly. Asterisk. Maybe, but I'll find out by trying. Asterisk. That single sentence turns the unknown into discovery. It transforms the task from a test into an experiment. You don't need faith in success, only curiosity about what happens next. Gentle beginnings also mean accepting imperfection as part of movement. The first stroke of a painting will never match the vision. The first word rarely carries the weight you hoped, but it carries something more important: evidence, proof that your will can turn into form. Once the first mark exists, momentum begins to take care of itself. You don't need to believe in yourself completely to start. Belief grows out of motion. Confidence isn't a prerequisite, it's a byproduct. Each small act of doing feeds the next, creating a rhythm your mind begins to trust. Soon, what felt impossible feels natural. Some days, the first gentle move is to do nothing at all, to rest intentionally, to not abandon yourself in frustration. Stillness can be the most powerful movement when it's chosen instead of forced. It reminds you that even without doing, you are still deserving. If you listen closely, you'll feel it, the subtle shift from resistance to readiness. It's not loud. It feels like breath, finding its rhythm again, like a door unlocking quietly in the mind. That's the moment you've been waiting for. The one that never announces itself, but changes everything once it happens. The world won't see it. No one will applaud the 10 seconds of courage it took to start. But your body will know. Your heart will remember. The first gentle move is how transformation begins, not with noise, but with honesty. You've spent enough time fighting your inertia. Now, it's time to walk with it, to turn the same energy that held you still into the energy that moves you forward. And as you take that first small, kind step, you'll notice something subtle. The fear doesn't vanish, but it walks beside you, quieter now, almost curious to see where you'll go. That is the start of freedom, when fear becomes witness instead of warden. From here, every act of effort becomes a conversation between peace and progress. And in that conversation, you begin to discover the art of motion, not as force, but as flow. There is a reason that resistance feels physical. It is. The same brain that tells you to step back from a flame will whisper times, not yet times, when you try to step towards something uncertain. To your nervous system, emotional risk and physical threat light up the same alarms. That's why your pulse quickens when you open a blank page or look at the start of a long task. The mind believes you're in danger, and danger means stop. Inside your skull lives a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. It's ancient, older than language. Its only job is to scan for what might hurt you. A frown, a memory of embarrassment, a smell that recalls failure. The amygdala treats them all as possible threats. When it fires, it floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline, telling you to fight, flee, or freeze. For most of us, it chooses the third. Freezing is not laziness. It is the nervous system pressing pause until it knows you're safe. While one part of you says times get moving, another part is busy building a wall of protection. You are trapped between acceleration and braking at the same time. No wonder it feels like exhaustion. Your brain also has a reward system, dopamine pathways that respond to novelty, success, and social approval. They light up when you complete a task or imagine being praised for it. But they also light up when you escape discomfort. That's why avoidance feels like relief. The same chemical that rewards progress can reward delay. The brain doesn't care whether the comfort comes from completion or postponement. It only records the decrease in tension. Knowing this changes everything. You are not lazy. You are wired to avoid pain and repeat relief. Each time you procrastinate, your brain learns that delay equals safety. The pattern strengthens until hesitation becomes automatic. The antidote isn't to bully your brain into submission. It's to retrain it gently to show it that beginning is safe and even pleasurable. Small, low stakes starts accomplish this best. Open the document and close it again. Sketch one rough line. Read a single paragraph. Each harmless exposure teaches your nervous system that starting doesn't equal danger. Over time, the alarm quiets. You can also use the body to calm the brain. Slow breathing signals safety faster than any thought can. Inhale deeply through the nose. Exhale longer than you inhale. This simple rhythm tells the amygdala that the threat has passed. Once the body relaxes, the mind follows. Notice how different this is from the culture's advice. To times, power through. Asterisk. Forcing yourself only confirms to the nervous system that the situation was, in fact, unsafe. Gentleness rewires faster than aggression. Safety grows through repetition, not pressure. Think of a wild animal learning trust. If you corner it, it bites. If you sit nearby quietly every day, it begins to approach. Your brain is that animal. Meet it with patience, and it will learn to come forward on its own. When you understand that biology is behind your hesitation, guilt begins to dissolve. You stop treating resistance as a moral flaw and start seeing it as a mechanical response. The question shifts from times, "What's wrong with me?" Asterisk, to times, "What does my body need to feel safe enough to begin?" Asterisk. Sometimes the answer is as simple as light, warmth, or a sip of water. Sometimes it's reassurance. Asterisk. We're just going to start, not finish everything. Just start. Asterisk. Safety is cumulative. Each calm beginning makes the next one easier. This is the science behind softness. When you pair awareness with kindness, you literally change neural pathways. You teach your brain that progress can coexist with peace. So the next time you feel that invisible break, remember, it's not defiance, it's devotion. Your mind is trying to protect the person you once were. Thank it. Breathe. Begin anyway, slowly enough that the body stays calm while the world around you starts to move. And as you sense that subtle cooperation between mind and motion, you might wonder, asterisk, if my brain has been protecting me all this time, what other patterns of safety are still shaping how I live? Asterisk. Long before you could name fear, your body learned its language. Every flinch, every tightening of the chest, every skipped breath became a small entry in the library of memory you now carry inside your skin. When you hesitate today, you're not just reacting to the present, you're responding to echoes of the past. The body doesn't forget, it repeats what it never got to resolve. Maybe that's why certain tasks make your stomach twist for no clear reason. Or why one tone of voice can shrink you faster than any logical argument. These reactions are not irrational. They're reminders. They say, asterisk, this felt dangerous once. Be careful. Asterisk. The mind can rewrite stories quickly. The body takes longer. It's slower, honest, and loyal to experience over theory. You can tell yourself, asterisk, I'm safe now. Asterisk, but until the body feels safety, it won't believe you. This is why change requires patience. You're not just changing thoughts, you're retraining the nervous system that lived through the old ones. Take a moment to scan yourself right now. Where does fear live when you think of beginning again? Your shoulders? Your throat? The heaviness behind your eyes? None of it is random. Each tension has a history. Shoulders remember the weight of responsibilities you never chose. The throat remembers words you weren't allowed to speak. The eyes remember the effort of holding tears back until it was convenient. The body's memory is precise. It doesn't punish. It protects. Each contraction is a small guard standing at its post. It believes it's keeping you safe. But guards that never rest become prisons. To change how you act, you must first teach the body that the war is over. Start with breath. Slow, steady, unforced. Feel how air moves into the places that have been locked tight for years. Exhale as if you're releasing old stories. The body learns through repetition. Every calm breath tells it, asterisk, we are not in danger anymore. Asterisk. Then, let movement return in small, conscious ways. Stretch your fingers before typing. Unclench your jaw before speaking. When you feel the familiar freeze, don't command yourself to move, invite the body to soften. That softness is the doorway to motion. You might notice emotions rising when you do this: sadness, anger, relief. That's the body finally speaking its backlog of memories. Don't rush it. Let each feeling complete its sentence. When you cry without knowing why, trust that something is being rewritten. It can help to visualize your body not as an obstacle but as an ally. Imagine it as a loyal friend who absorbed every blow on your behalf, who flinched so you didn't have to. When you see it that way, tenderness replaces frustration. You stop asking, asterisk, why won't my body cooperate? Asterisk. And start asking, asterisk, what is it trying to tell me? Asterisk. The more you listen, the more it tells you. You'll start noticing patterns, the slump that means defeat before you've begun, the shallow breath that signals self-doubt. Awareness itself is healing. The moment you notice, you've already shifted the pattern from automatic to conscious. And consciousness is choice. Sometimes healing doesn't look like courage, it looks like rest. It looks like lying down in the middle of a busy day and letting the muscles unclench. It looks like choosing silence when the world demands noise. These aren't escapes, they're recalibrations. The body cannot create from tension, it creates from safety. There's a reason that inspiration often arrives in stillness, in showers, walks, quiet mornings. The nervous system, soothed, becomes receptive again. Ideas need space to land. Action grows from calm soil. You might think you need to conquer your body to succeed, but what if success depends on cooperation instead? When body and mind trust each other, resistance loses its fuel. The body stops sounding the alarm. The mind stops mistaking peace for danger. As you rebuild this relationship, you begin to feel something subtle. A homecoming. You no longer live entirely in your thoughts. You inhabit yourself. Again. Movement no longer feels like leaving safety, it feels like returning to it. And when that happens, fear doesn't vanish. It changes texture. It becomes data, feedback, sensation, something you can work with, instead of something you run from. You are teaching the body new stories, stories where effort is not punishment, where beginning does not mean danger, where movement can happen without pain. And once the body starts to believe that, the mind will follow. Because underneath every hesitation you've ever had, there was always one question. Asterisk. Am I safe to be myself while I move? Asterisk. There's a moment when you look at what needs to be done and feel your chest tighten, your mind scatter, and your stomach twist. You call it laziness. But what you're really feeling is anxiety wearing the mask of inertia. The body isn't refusing to move, it's overwhelmed by everything that could go wrong once it does. Anxiety is the body's overprotective imagination. It lives in the future, painting vivid pictures of every possible failure, rejection, or loss of control. When the imagination becomes too sharp, reality blurs. You don't see the next step, you see 100 possible consequences, each one louder than the last. So you freeze, not out of indifference, but out of overload. It starts innocently. Asterisk. I'll do it later. When I have more energy. Asterisk. But later never comes, because the weight of anticipation drains the very energy you're waiting for. The longer you wait, the heavier it gets. Anxiety feeds on delay the way fire feeds on oxygen. You tell yourself, asterisk, I'm just bad at starting, asterisk, but beneath that thought is a quieter truth. Asterisk, I'm afraid of what starting will reveal about me. Asterisk. Anxiety whispers that if you try and fail, the failure will confirm every fear you've ever had about yourself. It convinces you that not trying is safer than trying and discovering you're not enough. This is how fear dresses up as fatigue. It's not that you can't move, it's that your body refuses to drag you toward pain. The mind says, asterisk, do it now, asterisk, while the nervous system says, asterisk, please don't hurt us again, asterisk. And because you've been taught to respect logic over instinct, you end up at war with yourself. The way out isn't to shout louder at the anxious part. It's to listen beneath the noise. Anxiety always has a reason, even when it's exaggerated. It may be reminding you of a time you were humiliated, or when effort went unnoticed, or when doing your best still wasn't enough. The body remembers those moments and assumes they'll repeat. When you feel that familiar heaviness before starting, pause and name it. Not times I'm lazy, asterisk, but times I'm scared that this will hurt, asterisk. Not times I can't do anything, asterisk, but times I don't know how to keep myself safe while I do this, asterisk. Naming transforms panic into information. It gives you a place to stand. Try a small act of presence when anxiety spikes. Look around and name 5 things you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. This simple grounding tells the nervous system that you're here, not in the imagined future. Action grows easier when the body knows where it is. Another quiet truth. Anxiety isn't just fear of failure, it's fear of momentum. Once you start, things might change. And change, even good change, means uncertainty. So the anxious mind keeps you where everything is predictable, even if predictability hurts. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar joy. You can soothe this part of yourself by promising smaller risks. Don't commit to finishing the project. Commit to opening it. Don't promise to fix everything. Promise to notice what happens when you begin. The brain learns safety through experience, not theory. Each gentle start proves that motion doesn't equal danger. It also helps to remove the story. Instead of saying, asterisk, I'm anxious because I'm broken, asterisk, treat anxiety as whether a passing climate of the mind. You don't argue with rain, you find a way to move gently through it. Sometimes you carry an umbrella of structure lists, timers, rituals. Sometimes you wait under shelter until it softens. Either way, you remain kind. What anxiety fears most is compassion. It thrives in secrecy and shame. The moment you say, asterisk, I'm anxious, but that's okay, asterisk, it loses its grip. You stop feeding it resistance and start feeding it reassurance. Over time, you'll notice something subtle. The tasks that once felt impossible begin to shrink. The hours you spent circling them turn into minutes of soft focus. You may even find peace in the act of beginning, Not because the fear is gone, but because you've stopped letting it define you. Anxiety isn't laziness, and you never were. You were simply a person trying to stay safe inside a nervous system that confused effort with threat. Once you teach it that movement can coexist with calm, the need to freeze fades. So when that familiar wave of hesitation arrives, place a hand over your heart and whisper, asterisk. We're safe. We can start. Asterisk. And as your body softens into that truth, notice how the smallest motion, a breath, a reach, a word, becomes the doorway to freedom. There is a certain peace that comes from the familiar. You know the landscape, the thoughts, the habits, even the pain. It may not make you happy, but it makes you feel safe. You've learned how to survive inside it. That's why change feels so frightening. It's not just new, it's unpredictable. And the mind, above all, craves predictability. This is the comfort zone paradox. The very place that once protected you eventually begins to confine you. At first, the routines and excuses, the patterns and comforts, feel like home. They shield you from uncertainty, from the sting of disappointment, from the vulnerability of trying again. But slowly, the walls that once held safety start to block the light. You wake up one day realizing that peace has turned into paralysis. It happens quietly. You stop reaching for what excites you because excitement also brings risk. You start repeating the same days because repetition feels like control. You tell yourself, asterisk, I'm fine where I am. Asterisk, but fine is a word people use when they've stopped growing. The comfort zone is not evil, it's simply incomplete. It's meant to be a resting place, not a permanent address. Yet many of us build houses there, furnishing them with routines and rationalizations. We trade expansion for certainty, and then wonder why life feels smaller than it used to. You may recognize this in subtle ways. The projects you never finish because finishing means being judged. The relationships you don't leave or deepen because either path means change. The dreams you shrink until they fit neatly into the schedule you already know. Comfort becomes the art of controlled suffocation. The paradox deepens because part of you needs time's comfort. Growth without grounding is chaos. But when comfort becomes the goal, rather than the foundation, it transforms from medicine into sedative. You stop noticing the quiet ache of unrealized potential, or you reinterpret it as gratitude. Asterisk. I should be thankful. Others have less. Asterisk. Gratitude becomes another defense against movement. To step beyond the comfort zone, you don't have to destroy it. You have to expand it. Think of it as a circle drawn in sand. You don't erase the circle, you draw a wider one. You bring the safety of what you know into contact with the uncertainty of what you long for. That overlap is where growth happens. You can begin by redefining discomfort. Instead of treating it as a red flag, treat it as a sign of life. The flutter in your chest before speaking up, the hesitation before beginning. The vulnerability of being seen, these are not proof of weakness. They're proof that something new is unfolding. The body trembles not because it's breaking, but because it's adapting. Ask yourself, asterisk, when was the last time I felt nervous, but alive? Asterisk. That feeling, the one that mixes fear and excitement, is the compass pointing beyond stagnation. It doesn't ask you to leap into chaos, only to take one small, conscious step into curiosity. Try it gently. Make a slightly bolder choice in conversation. Spend 10 minutes on the project you've avoided. Share one honest thought you usually swallow. Each time you do, the circle widens, and the world grows a little larger. Here's what most people misunderstand. Leaving the comfort zone doesn't mean leaving comfort behind. It means carrying comfort with you, creating internal safety that travels wherever you go. You can feel fear and still feel safe. You can stretch and still be supported. That balance is what true growth feels like, not a violent push into the unknown, but a graceful expansion into the possible. Eventually, the comfort zone itself transforms. It's no longer a cage that protects you from life. It becomes the foundation from which you explore it. You stop needing control because you trust your own capacity to handle uncertainty. When that happens, you'll notice a quiet shift. What once felt terrifying now feels inviting. What once felt impossible now feels inevitable. The fear doesn't disappear. It evolves into curiosity. And curiosity is the beginning of every transformation you've ever desired. As you sit with that thought, let it settle somewhere deep. Safety is not the absence of risk. It's the presence of trust. The more you trust yourself, the less you need walls to keep you safe. You've learned how fear disguises itself as laziness, as logic, as the comfort of routine. Now comes the practice that turns awareness into movement, the art of regulated action. This isn't about discipline in the traditional sense. It's not a battle of willpower against resistance. It's the opposite, an alliance between your nervous system and your intention. A way of moving that keeps the body calm while the mind begins to change. Most people approach action like a sprint. They wake up, filled with determination, push through the day, collapse at night, and wonder why motivation fades. But the body can't sustain sudden, explosive effort. It prefers rhythm. Regulated action is that rhythm, consistent, gentle, steady enough that fear never needs to intervene. Imagine your nervous system as a wave. When you push too hard, the wave crashes. When you avoid too long, the water stagnates. The goal is to ride that middle current where energy flows naturally. That means learning the signals that say times too much, times and times not enough, asterisk, and adjusting before you drown or dry out. Start with one principle. Asterisk, asterisk, slow is sustainable. Asterisk, asterisk. Action done at the speed of safety lasts longer than action forced through panic. You don't need to prove anything by rushing. The moment you feel your breath shorten or your jaw tighten, pause. Breathe until your body believes you again. Then continue. This is not laziness. It's regulation. It's how you teach your mind that productivity can coexist with peace. To practice, try setting smaller, calmer goals. Instead of, I'll finish the project, say, I'll work for 15 minutes while staying relaxed. Instead of, I'll fix everything today, say, I'll take one honest step without self-judgment. The task becomes secondary. The real objective is staying within your window of calm engagement. From there, consistency becomes effortless. When you act in a regulated state, you begin to notice something subtle. You make fewer mistakes, recover faster from distractions, and feel less attached to outcomes. The quality of attention changes. It's no longer sharpened by anxiety but deepened by presence. This is what flow actually feels like, not manic focus, but quiet absorption. You lose the sense of forcing. The mind and body move together, each adjusting to the other's cues. What was once effort turns into participation. Regulated action also means giving yourself permission to stop. The same way you learn to start gently, you must learn to rest intentionally. Pausing before exhaustion prevents burnout. It tells your nervous system, asterisk, I'm in charge now. I choose when to move and when to breathe. Asterisk, that choice is where real power lives. You can build small rituals to anchor this rhythm. Begin each work period with a breath, end with a stretch, or a single sentence of gratitude. Asterisk. That was enough for today. Asterisk. Over time, these gestures become signals cues that mark safety and completion. The body begins to associate action with calm, not chaos. If guilt tries to return that whisper that says you should be doing more, remind it that rest is part of motion. You're not abandoning effort, you're maintaining it. Even machines need recalibration. The difference is that you can choose it consciously. There will still be days when regulation slips, when you fall back into the old rhythm of overworking or freezing. When that happens, don't call it failure. Just notice it. Awareness itself brings you back into balance. Regulation isn't perfection. It's responsiveness. It's listening instead of controlling. The more you practice, the more natural it feels to live this way. The nervous system learns quickly when treated kindly. Within weeks, what once triggered panic, the blank screen, the conversation, the risk will simply feel like another breath to take. This is how people build lives that last. Not by conquering fear once, but by continually choosing balance over battle. Every gentle action sends the same message. Inward times I can move without hurting myself. Asterisk. One day, you'll look back and realize that regulation has become second nature. You'll start, work, rest, and begin again without the old tremor of dread. Effort will feel like breathing, not something to manage, but something that happens naturally when you're alive and present. That's the art of regulated action. Movement without war, progress without panic, discipline without violence. It's how peace and purpose finally learn to share the same space. As you hold this understanding, notice the quiet confidence it brings. You no longer need external pressure to move. Safety itself has become your motivation. And that safety will carry you into the next transformation, the one that happens when trust replaces fear entirely. Because when your nervous system finally learns that you can start and stop safely, what follows isn't just motion, it's freedom. There's a quiet ache that settles in when you break a promise to yourself. It's not dramatic, just a slow erosion of faith. Every time you say you'll begin and don't, something small inside you sighs. Asterisk, I knew we wouldn't. Asterisk. Over time, that sigh becomes a story. Asterisk. I can't trust myself. Asterisk. It's easy to miss how heavy that belief becomes. You start doubting your own word before you even give it. You plan less, dream smaller, apologize to yourself in advance for the things you suspect you'll never finish. You mistake this doubt for humility. But it's grief, the grief of self-betrayal repeated so often, it starts to feel like personality. You weren't born with that fracture. It formed slowly, through moments of disappointment that didn't have space to heal. Maybe it began when you pushed yourself too hard and broke down. Maybe when you kept a promise to others at the cost of your own needs. Maybe when effort went unnoticed and the pain of trying outweighed the hope of succeeding. Whatever the cause, the wound runs deep because it touches trust, the foundation of every relationship, including the one you have with yourself. You tell others that trust must be earned, but forget that you must earn it from yourself too. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet consistency. The self doesn't need perfection. It needs proof. Proof that when you say you'll care for it, you do. Listen for the small ways you break that promise. When you say you'll rest but scroll instead. When you promise you'll start tomorrow but fill tomorrow before it comes. When you silence your intuition to keep someone else comfortable. Each act whispers to the body. Asterisk. Your word is conditional. Asterisk. That's why starting feels so fragile. It's not just effort you fear losing, it's trust you fear breaking again. You don't want another piece of you to witness another unkept promise. But the truth is, trust can be rebuilt. The self is forgiving when met with honesty. It's never too late to start keeping small promises again, promises humble enough to keep, yet meaningful enough to matter. Begin with one. Asterisk. I will take one full breath before I pick up my phone. Asterisk. Asterisk. I will speak to myself with kindness at least once today. Asterisk. Asterisk. I will write one sentence, not the whole chapter. Asterisk. Then keep it, not for productivity, but for proof. Proof that you can rely on yourself again. Each time you follow through, the sigh turns softer. The doubt loses certainty. You start to sense that maybe you're capable of care, not just effort. That's what rebuilding trust feels like, not pride, but relief. You might wonder, asterisk, why should I trust myself after all the false starts? Asterisk, because you are not the same person who made those promises. Every attempt changed you, even if it ended in silence. You've learned what pushes you too far, what rhythms sustain you, what boundaries keep you safe. You have new data. Trust is built not on perfection, but on understanding. When you keep one small promise, you alter the entire narrative. The mind begins to record new evidence. Asterisk. We said we would, and we did. Asterisk. It stops predicting disappointment and starts expecting follow-through. And expectation shapes behavior. You begin to act like someone you can depend on. Think of it like tending a neglected garden. You don't demand bloom on the first day. You water, you clear weeds, you return tomorrow. The flowers don't trust you right away. They've learned abandonment. But slowly, they open again. The self is the same. Consistency is its sunlight. If guilt rises, and it will remind yourself that guilt isn't punishment. It's direction. It shows you where repair is needed. You can't rewrite the past, but you can honor it by acting differently now. At night, when you review your day, don't count what's unfinished. Count what you kept. The moment you begin tracking honesty over outcome, you start to feel safe inside your own skin again. This is how the cycle breaks. Not through grand resolutions, but through daily reconciliation. The self stops fearing your voice because it finally matches your actions. And one day, you'll notice that starting no longer feels like a threat to your integrity, it feels like proof of it. You'll sit down to begin, and instead of hearing times, I hope I don't fail again, asterisk, you'll hear, asterisk, I know I'll show up, even if it's imperfect. Asterisk. That's the quiet power of rebuilt trust. It doesn't roar. It hums beneath everything you do. It's the sound of faith returning to its source. As that hum grows stronger, a new possibility appears. What if keeping promises to yourself could feel less like duty and more like devotion? What if follow-through became an act of love, not labor? Big promises make beautiful speeches, but small ones rebuild lives. Grand declarations, times I'll change everything, I'll never slip again, I'll become my best self, starting Monday. Times they light up the mind with adrenaline and vanish just as quickly. What stays, what heals, are the quiet agreements that you keep even when no one is watching. Every small agreement is a thread of trust stitched back into the fabric of your life. When you tell yourself, asterisk, I'll take a walk after lunch, asterisk, and you do, it seems trivial, but to your nervous system, it's proof. Proof that your word has weight again. Healing happens at this microscopic level. The psyche doesn't rebuild in leaps. It rebuilds in moments of alignment between what you say and what you do. Start with something you can't fail. 1 glass of water. 5 minutes of stillness. 1 page of writing. The smaller the promise, the faster the proof. Each kept agreement whispers to the part of you that doubts. Asterisk. See? You can be trusted. Asterisk. The goal isn't discipline, it's intimacy. Every time you follow through, you come closer to yourself. You stop living as two people, the one who plans and the one who disappoints, and begin to move as one whole self. That wholeness feels like peace. You might feel impatient. A voice inside says, asterisk. This is too slow. I need bigger change. Asterisk. That voice is still living in the old pattern, chasing validation through extremes. But real transformation is quiet. It doesn't need spectacle. It needs sincerity. Think of how the ocean smooths a stone not through force, but repetition. Each small wave touches, retreats, returns, day after day, until sharp edges soften. That's what small agreements do to the inner critic. They wear down its certainty. They polish fear into calm. The power of these promises isn't in their scale, but in their honesty. Don't promise what you times wish, times you could do. Promise what you times will, times do. If that means 2 minutes of journaling or 1 deep breath between tasks, so be it. Truth builds faster than ambition. You may slip. You'll forget. You'll overcommit and have to start smaller again. That's not failure, that's refinement. Trust is elastic. It doesn't break with 1 mistake. It stretches, waits for your return. The only thing that shatters it is deceit, pretending you kept a promise when you didn't. So be transparent with yourself. If you miss a day, say so. Honesty itself becomes another kept promise. There's a moment subtle but powerful when this practice begins to shift your identity. You stop thinking, asterisk, I hope I'll follow through, asterisk, and start knowing, asterisk, I do what I say, even in small ways. Asterisk. This is how confidence is born, not from perfection, but from reliability. As you gather these small proofs, your internal voice changes. It softens. The critic that once shouted, asterisk, you'll never change, asterisk, begins to hesitate, then falls silent. A quieter voice emerges, one that says, asterisk, we're doing fine. We're keeping pace with ourselves. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. This gentler rhythm doesn't make you passive. It makes you consistent. Progress becomes self-sustaining because it no longer depends on mood. You don't wait to feel ready. You act because action itself keeps you balanced. Small agreements also prepare you for bigger ones. Once you trust yourself with 5 minutes, 10 doesn't feel dangerous. Once you keep 1 promise for a week, another for a month feels possible. Each success rewires the nervous system's threshold for safety. Starting becomes easier because it no longer threatens your identity. It reinforces it. Here's something to remember. You don't have to motivate yourself into these moments. You can simply invite them. The body loves rhythm. If you do something small at the same time each day, the action becomes a cue for calm rather than resistance. The more predictable your care becomes, the less your mind fights it. Eventually, you realize these agreements aren't tasks at all, they're rituals of self-respect. They say, asterisk, I'm worth showing up for, even when no one else is here to see it. Asterisk. And that's the quiet miracle. Healing isn't a single transformation. It's hundreds of tiny reconciliations stacked gently on top of one another until one day you wake up and realize that you trust yourself again. From here, keeping promises will no longer feel like a chore. It will feel like breathing, automatic, sustaining, natural. And as that trust grows steadier, you'll reach the next truth waiting just beyond it. You don't have to do everything perfectly to be whole. You only have to stay honest while you learn. Confidence doesn't arrive before you begin. It grows because times you begin. The world teaches you to wait for certainty to gather enough skill, assurance, or approval before you take the first step. But confidence is not the fuel for motion. It's the flame born from time's friction, from trying while unsure, from surviving imperfection, and realizing you're still okay. When you start moving again, even gently, you begin to collect proof that your fear can coexist with courage, that your voice doesn't break the world, that momentum can exist without pressure. Each small completion, each kept promise, becomes a stone in the foundation of self-trust. Confidence is not bravado. It's quiet familiarity with your own resilience. It's knowing, I've been uncertain before, and I still moved, It's feeling the tremor in your hands and continuing anyway. You don't become confident by eliminating doubt, you become confident by ceasing to obey it. Think of the first time you rode a bicycle. You didn't study balance into existence. You wobbled, you fell, you tried again until your body learned what words could never teach. The same law governs your inner life. You learn through motion what your mind could never reason you into believing. The truth is, confidence doesn't feel like power at first. It feels like participation. It feels like being willing to look foolish, to learn in public, to show up without armor. It's softer than people imagine, less like a roar, more like a hum. The hum of self-acceptance, steady and calm beneath the noise of fear. One of the greatest misunderstandings about confidence is that it means certainty. But certainty is brittle. Confidence is fluid. It adapts. It says, I don't know what's coming, but I know I can meet it. It trusts capacity over control. When you live this way, you stop performing for your reflection. You no longer rehearse life in your head before living it. You act, adjust, learn, continue. Every small act of expression, sending the message, speaking the truth, creating without apology, adds weight to your inner voice that says, I belong here. Confidence thrives in authenticity. When you stop pretending to be unshakable, you become believable to yourself first. People feel that honesty. It draws them closer. Seachers oh. They see someone not afraid to be human, and in that humanity, they find courage of their own. Notice how movement changes your internal dialogue. The voice that once said, what if I fail? Begins to ask, what if I learn? The one that said, what will they think? Transforms into, what will I discover? You start replacing self-surveillance with self-discovery, judgment with curiosity. Confidence isn't a single emotion you reach and hold. It's a rhythm you return to. It wavers, it renews, it breathes. When you forget it, you don't start from zero. You start from memory. You've been brave before you can be again. If you want to feel more confident, stop focusing on feeling times it, and start practicing it. Begin something small each day that asks you to trust yourself. Make decisions without double-checking them a dozen times. Ask for what you need, even when your voice trembles. Let your lived evidence speak louder than your inner critic. The mind builds confidence like muscle through repetition and recovery. Each wobble and correction strengthens belief in your own adaptability. When you experience confidence this way, you stop waiting for permission. You no longer need someone to declare you ready. You see that readiness was never external, it was the willingness to begin before you felt complete. This kind of confidence feels different. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It moves like breath, steady and grounded. It allows mistakes, expects uncertainty, and still keeps going. You can feel it in the way you walk, the way you rest, the way you no longer flinch at your reflection. It's important to remember, confidence and humility are siblings, not opposites. True confidence carries gentleness, the knowledge that everyone is learning, including you. When you understand this, compassion replaces competition. The world becomes less about proving and more about participating. So when fear whispers, asterisk, you don't know what you're doing, asterisk, answer, honestly, asterisk, maybe not yet, but I'm learning by doing, asterisk. That's confidence in motion. It doesn't wait for fear to vanish. It invites fear to walk beside it. Confidence is not the absence of uncertainty. It's the refusal to let uncertainty decide who you become. As you live in this rhythm, movement, reflection, adjustment, continuation, you realize that confidence isn't a destination. It's a lifestyle of self-trust. You are no longer performing courage, you are embodying it. And as you keep moving, you begin to feel something deeper than confidence. Peace. The kind that doesn't depend on outcomes, only on honesty. You've spent so much of your life waiting for the right time, the right feeling, the right version of yourself to finally appear and say, asterisk, now you can begin, asterisk. But waiting, though it feels like safety, quietly becomes a prison. It teaches you to rehearse life instead of live it, to dream without touching, to plan without acting, to measure every risk by the comfort you might lose. At first, the waiting feels harmless. You tell yourself you're just preparing, learning, thinking, building clarity. But preparation slowly becomes postponement. And postponement, disguised as patience, becomes fear in elegant clothing. What you've been calling readiness might really be hesitation begging for permission. The truth is, the right time never arrives. Time doesn't hand you an invitation. It only hands you choices, each one small, imperfect, real. You are either in motion or in pause. Both are valid, but only one builds a life. Creation begins not when conditions are perfect, but when you decide that imperfection will do. Every artist, every thinker, every builder has started in the middle of doubt. They simply grew tired of waiting for certainty. They began, and in beginning, they became. Creation is not a singular act. It's a relationship. It asks for your presence, not your perfection. It doesn't care if you're scared, only that you show up. When you move towards something that matters, even clumsily, the act itself starts shaping you. It gives form to your scattered thoughts, purpose to your emotions, and voice to the parts of you that waiting kept silent. Maybe you've been waiting to feel confident, but confidence lives times inside, times the act of doing. Maybe you've been waiting to feel healed, but healing happens times through time's movement. Maybe you've been waiting for permission, but permission is a door that only opens from the inside. Look at your life for a moment. Think of everything that exists now because someone stopped waiting. Every story, every song, every bridge, every connection. None of them began in certainty. They began in curiosity. You don't need to wait for clarity to move. Movement brings clarity. The first steps illuminate the path. The world reveals itself to the ones willing to meet it halfway. When you act, you shift the story. You stop being the one life happens to and become the one who participates. Creation is participation. It doesn't guarantee comfort, but it guarantees meaning. Meaning is what waiting steals most. The days blur together because you're not engaging with the present, you're rehearsing for a future that never quite arrives. But the moment you take even the smallest real step, color returns to the day. You begin to feel texture again, the raw aliveness of being in motion, however uncertain. This doesn't mean abandoning patience or mindfulness. It means ending the version of patience that hides fear. There's a patience that listens, and there's a patience that delays. One feeds creation, the other drains it. Learn to tell the difference. Learn creation. To tell, ask yourself, asterisk. What am I waiting for right now? Asterisk. Approval? Confidence? A guarantee? Whatever answer comes, ask again. Asterisk. What if I began anyway? Asterisk. This simple question dismantles years of hesitation. The mind has no defense against gentle curiosity. It can't argue with times, maybe I could try. Asterisk. The most powerful lives are rarely built on certainty. They're built on experiments, on showing up again and again until showing up becomes second nature. You are not behind, you are simply paused. And the pause was never a mistake, it was preparation disguised as fear. It gave you perspective, empathy, awareness. Now, it's time to move, not as punishment, but as renewal. Start small. Start scared. Start imperfect. Just start. Because the first moment of motion is the exact moment life begins again. And once you do, you'll realize something profound. You were never waiting for the right moment, the moment was waiting for you. There is a strange kind of peace that appears when you finally allow yourself to do things badly. It's not the peace of achievement, it's the peace of honesty. The moment you stop trying to prove that every action must be perfect, you give yourself permission to move. And in that movement, life returns. Imperfect action is terrifying at first. It feels like stepping onto a stage half-prepared or painting with trembling hands. But perfection was never your job, participation was. The world doesn't remember flawless plans. It remembers what was expressed, shared, lived. Think of all the moments you've delayed because you wanted to get it right. The idea that never left your notebook. The conversation you rehearsed until it lost its meaning. The dream you filed away for someday. How many of those moments were waiting, not for skill, but for permission to begin imperfectly? Every masterpiece you've ever admired began as something awkward. The first draft, the first sketch, the first conversation, all of them messy, all of them necessary. The rawness of imperfection isn't evidence of failure, it's evidence of birth. When you act imperfectly, you show trust not in the result, but in yourself. You're saying, asterisk, I believe I can grow while moving. Asterisk. You shift from self-protection to self-participation. That shift is the foundation of freedom. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that mistakes are moral failures. From childhood, we learn to equate error with punishment. The red mark on a page, the disappointed sigh, the loss of approval. But mistakes are simply data feedback from the world that helps you refine. The more you act, the faster you learn. The faster you learn, the less fear controls you. When you realize that imperfection is a teacher, not a verdict, you stop waiting for courage to appear. You move, because curiosity becomes stronger than fear. Try this. Pick something small that you've been delaying a message to send, a sketch to draw, a sentence to write. Do it quickly, before anxiety builds its argument. Let it be messy. Then, instead of judging it, thank it. That single imperfect act has broken the spell. The longer you wait, the heavier the beginning becomes. The sooner you act, the lighter you feel. The beauty of imperfection is that it makes you approachable to yourself and to others. When you allow yourself to be unfinished, you allow connection. People don't bond with flawless images, they bond with shared humanity. Every crack in your confidence is a doorway where understanding can enter. Imperfect action also teaches you humility, the quiet acceptance that you are a work in progress. But humility isn't weakness, it's flexibility. It means you can adapt, pivot, grow. The rigid perfectionist breaks under pressure. The imperfect creator bends, learns, continues. Freedom doesn't come from mastery. It comes from permission. Permission to experiment. Permission to fail. Permission to exist in the middle of becoming. You can begin cultivating this freedom right now. Start something knowing you'll change it later. Speak an idea before it's polished. Share something half-formed. Move your body without choreography. Let imperfection become your companion instead of your captor. With repetition, something profound happens. The fear that once paralyzed you becomes background noise. It doesn't vanish, it just loses authority. You learn to hear it without obeying it. And in that moment, you discover that freedom isn't the absence of fear, it's movement despite it. Fear can travel with you. It just doesn't get to drive. The first few imperfect actions will still sting. Your mind will rush to criticize, to label, to fix. But over time, you'll notice that nothing terrible happens. The world keeps spinning. The sun still rises. The only thing that changes is your relationship to possibility. You begin to see that failure isn't the end of the road. It's part of the scenery. Once you've experienced this truth even once you've acted imperfectly and survived, you'll never fully believe the old story again. The cage door stays open. Imperfect action doesn't just create results, it creates resilience. It teaches you that momentum matters more than mastery. That progress is made of rough edges. That your worth was never waiting at the finish line, it was walking beside you all along. So today, do one thing badly with intention. Let the lines wobble, the voice crack, the idea stumble. Watch how the fear fades once it meets reality. When you first start moving again, it feels deliberate. You push, you encourage yourself, you watch every step. But then, something shifts. The effort becomes rhythm. You stop thinking about the movement and start feeling times it. That is the beginning of flow, the quiet state where doing and being become the same thing. Flow is not magic. It's alignment. It happens when your body, mind, and attention agree to exist in one moment at a time. There's no rehearsal, no comparison, no audience. Just presence, unguarded, immersive, real. You've tasted it before. While walking at sunset, while drawing without noticing time, while speaking honestly to someone who truly listened. Flow is the natural state beneath anxiety. It's what remains when the noise of should finally quiets. Presence begins with permission. Permission to stop multitasking your life. To stop thinking about what this moment must produce. The paradox of flow is that it arrives only when you stop chasing results. When the act itself becomes enough. When you enter flow, fear doesn't disappear. It softens into focus. The edges of self-consciousness blur. You're no longer the observer of your life. You're inside it. You start to move not for reward, but for rhythm. Every breath becomes participation. The mind often resists this surrender because it craves control. It wants to calculate, measure, anticipate. But the deeper intelligence of the body already knows how to be here. It knows how to breathe, balance, listen. To find flow, you don't need to learn something new. You need to trust what's already fluent within you. That trust begins with simplicity. Pick one thing, just one, and give it your full attention. Notice the textures, the sensations, the details you usually skim past. This focus is an act of devotion. In a world built on distraction, attention is the purest form of presence. You'll know you've entered flow when time changes texture. It doesn't rush or drag. It dissolves. You forget to ask, asterisk, how much longer? Asterisk, because there's nowhere else to be. You aren't performing productivity, you're inhabiting experience. But flow isn't always smooth. Sometimes, it begins as resistance. You sit down to write, and, for 10 minutes, it feels unbearable. Then, somewhere between frustration and surrender, the mind stops negotiating. The body takes over. Flow begins not with comfort, but with commitment. The decision to stay long enough for presence to find you. Presence doesn't mean perfection. It means attention without judgment. You can be in flow even while making mistakes. The difference is that you're engaged, not escaping. You're participating in reality, not policing it. This kind of focus heals. The brain releases dopamine and endorphins, the chemistry of satisfaction and calm. Your heart rate stabilizes, breath deepens, tension loosens. You begin to feel at home in your own process again. Action becomes rest in motion. Think of a dancer not performing, just moving, or a craftsman shaping wood, the sound of the tool in rhythm with his breath. Flow looks effortless, but it's built on trust. Trust that the next step will appear only when you take the current one fully. You can invite flow into your daily life in the simplest ways. Wash dishes slowly. Listen to the rhythm of rain. Write one sentence, and let it lead you to the next. Life will meet you wherever your attention lands. Flow also teaches humility. You realize that creativity, progress, healing, they don't belong to you. They move times through times you. You're not the architect of every moment, but the instrument it plays through. The self expands and softens, and in that softening, peace arrives. The secret to sustaining flow is balance. You can't force presence any more than you can force calm. You can only create the conditions for it. Clarity, simplicity, kindness. When the noise quiets, flow finds its way back like a river remembering its path. There's a saying, the opposite of control is not chaos, it's trust. Flow is trust in motion. Trust that you are enough for this moment. Trust that movement doesn't need micromanagement. Trust that you can let go without losing direction. In flow, you don't chase time. You inhabit it. You don't seek worth. You express it. You don't demand certainty. You discover it within the act itself. And when you rise from that state, even if only for a few minutes, you carry something back with you, the memory that peace is not found after the work, but within it. There's a moment, somewhere in the slow rhythm of healing, when you realize that you haven't criticized yourself for a while. No voice whispering time's not enough. Asterisk. No quiet tally of mistakes. Just stillness. At first it feels strange, almost suspicious. You've lived for so long in a constant evaluation of your own worth that peace feels like you're forgetting something. But you're not forgetting. You're remembering who you were before you learn to measure everything you are. Self-judgment begins as protection. Somewhere in your past, you learned that being hard on yourself might keep you safe from rejection, from failure, from other people's disappointment. You believed that if you punished your flaws first, no one else could use them against you. But judgment doesn't shield. It shatters. It divides you from yourself until even your smallest mistakes feel like crimes. Think of how often that voice has interrupted your beginnings. Asterisk. You're doing it wrong. Asterisk. Asterisk. You'll never finish. Asterisk. Asterisk. You always quit. Asterisk. It speaks like an authority, but it's only memory repeating itself. The end of self-judgment doesn't come from silencing that voice. It comes from changing your relationship with it. Instead of arguing, listen. Ask. Asterisk. What are you trying to protect me from? Asterisk. Usually, the answer is tender. Asterisk. I don't want you to be embarrassed again. Asterisk. Asterisk. I don't want you to waste time. Asterisk. Asterisk. I just don't want you to get hurt. Asterisk. When you hear the fear behind the criticism, compassion becomes possible. Compassion isn't indulgence, it's understanding. It's the steady hand that turns punishment into guidance. You begin to realize that judgment never made you better, it just made you smaller. It drained your energy into guilt instead of growth. What improves you is curiosity, not condemnation. Start noticing the micro moments when judgment arises. The sigh before you speak, the wince after you make a typo, the way you replay conversations. In those moments, instead of attacking yourself, say softly, asterisk. Of course you feel that way. Asterisk. This simple phrase dismantles years of inner hostility. It says, asterisk. You are allowed to be learning. Asterisk. Forgiveness doesn't happen once. It happens in small acknowledgements like this. Each time you choose understanding over accusation, the nervous system relaxes. You're no longer a threat to yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, everything else begins to flow more easily. Creativity, courage, even rest. The mind resists this shift because it equates judgment with control. It fears that without criticism, you'll stop caring. But love is a far better teacher than fear. When you care for something, you naturally nurture it. You don't need to scold yourself into progress. You just need to care enough to keep showing up. Self-compassion doesn't erase responsibility, it makes it sustainable. When you hold yourself gently, accountability becomes an act of respect, not punishment. You can admit mistakes without collapsing into shame, and that humility keeps you honest. You might begin to notice that, as judgment softens, you treat others differently too. The mind that forgives itself forgives more easily elsewhere. The standard changes from perfection to presence. You stop expecting people to fill your old voids and start appreciating them for simply being here, imperfect and real. The end of self-judgment isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, steady, like snow melting. One day, you'll catch yourself doing something ordinary, laughing at a small mistake, letting go of a thought that once would have spiraled, and you'll realize the war is over. You didn't win by conquering yourself, you won by calling a truce. There will still be echoes, of course. Old reflexes take time to fade. But now, when the voice returns, you'll greet it with a smile instead of fear. Asterisk, I know you. Asterisk, you'll say. Asterisk, you're just trying to keep me safe. But I'm safe now. Asterisk. That's what healing sounds like, not silence, but softness. Without judgment, Life becomes easier to inhabit. Effort feels lighter. You no longer have to earn the right to rest. You stop being a project and start being a person again. And in that space, something beautiful begins to bloom: gratitude. Not the performative kind, but the kind that arises naturally when pain stops being the only lens. Gratitude for the breath, for the day, for the chance to begin again, without the weight of constant correction. This is the peace you've been chasing all along, not perfection, not control, but friendship with yourself. And as that friendship deepens, a final realization dawns. You were never lazy. You were never broken. You were just scared, tired, waiting for safety that only self-understanding could give. Now that safety is here. You've walked a long way to arrive here through fear, resistance, gentleness, and truth, and at the end of it all, you find something simple waiting for you. You were never lazy. That word, that shadow that's followed you for years, was never a diagnosis, it was a misunderstanding. Lazy was how you learned to explain what you didn't yet understand about fear, fatigue, and self-protection. It was a label you put on a wound before you knew how to name pain. Every time you called yourself lazy, what you really meant was times I'm afraid to begin, asterisk, or times I don't feel safe to try, asterisk, or times I'm too tired to face another disappointment, asterisk. But you didn't have those words yet, so you used the one the world gave you. Now you know better, and with that knowing comes release. You see now that laziness was never apathy. It was hesitation born from tenderness. It was the body saying, asterisk, please don't hurt me again, asterisk. It was your mind, cautious from all the times it tried and wasn't met with understanding. The stillness you hated was never failure, it was self-preservation. You can forgive yourself now, not because you did something wrong, but because you believed for so long that you had. Forgiveness, in this case, means clarity, seeing your old self not as flawed, but as brave. You survived confusion without compassion, and you made it here anyway. Look back for a moment at all the versions of you who carried that label. The student who stared at the page, too anxious to start. The worker who stayed still because the next step felt like a cliff. The dreamer who wanted to begin but didn't know how to handle being seen. Each one was doing their best with the understanding they had. And each one was waiting, not for motivation, but for safety, for softness, for this moment. You are the one they were waiting for. The word lazy loses power the moment you see what lived underneath it. Underneath was fear. Underneath, fear was protection. Underneath protection was love, a deep instinct to keep yourself intact. You were never resisting life, you were trying to survive it. And now, as you breathe in this new understanding, notice what changes. The body loosens. The heart feels lighter. The guilt that used to push you toward frantic effort begins to dissolve, replaced by quiet gratitude. You no longer need to prove your worth through exhaustion. You don't need to be relentless to be real. What you need, what you've always needed, is gentleness paired with honesty. Gentleness says, asterisk, I understand why you stopped, asterisk. Honesty says, asterisk, and I know you're ready to move again, asterisk. This balance is what true growth feels like. Not rushing, not freezing, but a steady rhythm between rest and reach. The space where action feels like care, not punishment. So, as you begin again, because beginning is what life endlessly asks of us, remember this truth. There's no such thing as wasted time when awareness follows. Every pause, every delay, every quiet moment of not doing shaped the person who finally learned how to move with compassion. You didn't lose years. You learned language, the language of your own mind. You no longer have to chase worth or wrestle with guilt. The work ahead doesn't require penance. It requires participation, living fully, softly, presently. That's the goal. If you ever forget this truth, return here. Sit quietly. Place a hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat steady, patient, alive. Whisper to yourself, asterisk. I was never lazy. I was afraid. And that's okay. Asterisk. Let the words land like a warm cloth on an old wound. Let the body believe them. Because belief is what completes the healing. From this moment on, you no longer owe the world proof of your effort. You only owe yourself honesty about what feels meaningful, what feels alive. Follow that, and life will meet you halfway. Starting doesn't need to be dramatic anymore. It can be as simple as a breath, a word, a glance towards something you love. The courage to begin is no longer something you must borrow, it's something that lives quietly within you now. You are the person who starts. Not because you finally fixed yourself, but because you finally forgave yourself. And that forgiveness, that understanding that you were never lazy, only scared, is the moment you become free. Free to begin again. Free to rest without guilt. Free to live without proving. You don't need to become anyone else. You only need to keep becoming times yourself. Asterisk. That is the journey. That is the return. That is peace.